The evil design of Japan's death penalty.
Today, most of the developed world has ended the death penalty. But in 2024, there are still 2 countries in the OECD that use it: the United States of America and Japan.
North Korea does it?
But while the US has been transparent about its ultimate punishment, Japan has kept its practices secret for years. It was only in 2010 that the world was finally shown the evil design of Japan's death penalty. July 26, 2022. Tomohiro Kato is sitting in his cell in the Tokyo Detention Center. 14 years ago, he killed 7 people and injured 10.
東京の警察によると、秋生セクアンでの自傷事件で少なくとも7人が死亡し、10人が負傷しました。警察によれば、ある男がトラックで買い物かの群れに突っ込みました。その後、彼はレンタカーから飛び降り、倒した人々を刺し始め、次に
Oh my gosh. But what kind of mental illness?
恐怖に限った傍観者に注意を向けました。
In 2011, Tomohiro Kato was sentenced to death. Every day he wakes up at 7 a.m. and heads to bed at 9 p.m. in a cell that's the size of about 4 tatami mats. He has a sink, a commode, bedding, and a small desk. In Japan, death row...
To be fair, if this is what the cell actually looks like, it's nicer than the fucking jails.
Inmates can wait decades for an execution. But unlike the US, they wait for a day they never really know is coming. Any random morning, the inmate can be taken to the execution chamber. They're given no more than a few hours' notice. The Japanese state says that this helps with emotional stability.
Emotional stability?
It reduces the chances of an inmate taking life. Some argue it reduces the chances of an inmate taking life.
Do not want to be age restricted and demonetized. I understand.
Life. Some argue it's justice. Their victims weren't given notice either. Others...
Yeah, but okay, there's a difference between, like, justice and... like, what... Like what this person did is terrible. Simple as that. But is all the time people get death penalty, is that truly what they deserve? No.
Say it's inhumane. For 34 years, a man named Menda Sakai didn't know which day would be his last. In 1983, he was freed. The police officer who arrested him revealed that he had concealed Sakai's alibi that proved he was innocent. 12,410 mornings with an unjustified fear for execution. In 2014, Iwa Hakamada was also released and given a retrial due to possibly falsified evidence. He was the longest-serving death row inmate on the planet.
Wow.
Hakamada spent more than 45 years in prison, waiting. In the Tokyo...
40... He spent 45 years of his life in prison for a crime that he didn't commit.
Tokyo Detention Center.
Am I tripping? What the fuck?
Sits in his cell. He's surrounded by objects purposely made rounder, so that he can't finish off his sentence earlier than expected.
Oh.
On July 26, 2022, after 14 years of waiting, he hears more noises than usual outside of his door.
Bro, this is enough for a person to go, like, insane. Like, genuinely. Like, I'm surprised these people didn't go insane.
Today, the majority of the developed world has outlawed the death penalty.
Unless they did.
But Japan is strange. This book explains why.
North Korea just does public executions.
Even though it's still legal in the US, it's debatable. The United States is a federal, divided country. Many states have phased out the death penalty entirely. Japan, on the other hand, is a central...
Oh, hold on, what'd they say?
The United States is a federal... This book explains why. Even though it's still legal in the US, it's debatable. The United States is a federal, divided country. Many states have phased out the death penalty entirely. Japan, on the other hand, is a centralized state where polls have shown that the public supports it with a clear majority. The US's death penalty is intimately connected with its history of racial discrimination and enslavement. Japan is ethnically homogeneous and has less inequality. The fall of an authoritarian leader like Hitler, Mussolini, Salazar, and Franco all led to the abolition of the death penalty in their respective countries. Japan's authoritarian state also fell, but the death penalty remained. In Austria, Great Britain, and France, the election of a left-wing government all led to the abolition of capital punishment. In 2009, Japan elected the center-left Democratic Party of Japan. The death penalty stayed. But what makes Japan's situation even stranger is how uniquely brutal it is. Its homicide rate is a fraction of that found in the US, and it's lower than all the European countries which have abolished the death penalty.
Wait, what?
Found in the US. But what makes Japan's situation even stranger is how uniquely brutal it is. Its homicide rate is a fraction of that found in the US, and it's lower than all the European countries which have abolished the death penalty.
Really?
Nevertheless, the percentage of murder offenders sentenced to death in Japan and the US are around the same. In 2018,
well, the US just be locking up people, but other countries do as well.
15 Japanese prisoners were killed with...
I mean, I'm not saying we don't lock up people for valid reasonings, but there is some, like there is just some bullshit people get arrested for. It's like, you just wasting taxpayer dollars arresting someone for that.
About 116 inmates on death row. That's 10 less than the US's 25, which had more than 10 times the amount of inmates on death row. 7 of the 15 executions were part of the AUM Shinriko doomsday cult. The Japanese state sometimes executes in batches. All 7 were killed on the same morning.
Whoa.
While the US explicitly treats the death penalty differently from other criminal sentencing, in Japan it's treated like other criminal punishments. To be put to death in the US, you must go through a bifurcated trial system. There is a criminal trial for determining guilt or innocence, which requires unanimity. After, if
I have a weird stance. Well, to me, I wouldn't say it's weird, but I have a stance on the death penalty that like probably isn't. It's definitely not the most popular, but it's because of religion that I have my viewpoint. But I don't really fully believe. I don't really believe in the death penalty. Like overall, I don't feel like humans have. I don't feel like overall humans have the right to judge whether someone else lives or not. Like, as a Christian, because God's supposed to decide when that person goes. However, I do understand the death penalty. Like a freaking pedo or some shit. Like I understand. I understand. I'm not like man anything, but I'm not overall for it, because I think also like jail and prison and shit is like a whole bunch of fucking mental torture, like for people, and like ending their life is just taking them out of what is kind of giving them what they want in some situations. So yeah, but anyways,
determined to be guilty, it goes to another trial for deciding the punishment. Here you must receive, again, a unanimous agreement from the jury. Then the judge can serve you the death penalty. Florida and Alabama are the only exceptions. But these two states are outliers in the US context.
I live in Alabama.
And they still require a supermajority. In Japan, it's different. Under the Saiban system, citizens act like judges. They sit alongside professional ones to determine both the verdict and the sentence of a crime. All that is required for the death penalty is a majority. In theory, 5 judges on the panel can believe the defendant is guilty and deserves the death penalty, while the other 4 can believe the defendant is innocent and deserves no punishment whatsoever. With this close of a vote, the defendant
deserves no punishment?
Is guilty and deserves the death penalty, while the other 4 can believe the defendant is innocent and deserves no punishment whatsoever.
Wow, that's like a big, like, Like, yeah, let's vote for the death penalty. No, we don't think he did anything wrong. That's a big jump. Like he didn't do anything wrong, and then the other choice is death penalty.
It's close of a vote. The defendant can be sentenced to death. In Japan, there are 7 detention centers that execute the death penalty. It's the justice minister who decides when it will take place. 5 days after he or she signs the warrant, the prisoner is put to death. These are usually signed right before political recess, moments where media coverage is limited. The executions are not made clear to the family members and lawyers of the inmates. They only learn after it's taken place. Kato is brought into a prayer room. Here he is read his last rites by a spiritual advisor. He is given time to write a will and maybe to consume some snacks or even smoke a cigarette. Afterwards, he's taken into another small room with an altar. If they're Buddhist, it will be a figure of the Buddha. If they're one of the few Christians in the country, a crucifix. In this room, the execution order is officially read out by the...
I didn't know they had religious respect. Is that the correct word? I didn't know they did that.
Prison warden. The last thing Kato sees are the blue curtains covering the next room. The guards wrap a bleached white blindfold around his eyes, throw a black hood over his head, handcuff his hands behind his back, and tie his knees together. He is taken to the next and final room. In the US, lethal injection is the primary method of executing the death penalty. In Japan, hanging is the only method.
Wow. Okay.
At the center of the room are 2 red squares. An inmate is made to stand in the center. Beneath is a trap door connected to an adjacent room. When the inmate is in place, 3 officers enter this room. They do not see the prisoner. What they see instead are 3 identical buttons. 2 do nothing, but the third opens the trap door. The 3 officers do not know which one is the kill switch. This divides the responsibility between all 3. It's also been mentioned that there is a delayed circuit to hide who pressed the kill button if they were pressed at different times, but I could not find a good source to confirm this. For their service, all 3 officers received 20,000 yen, about $180 each. Watching the execution are a few officials: the head of the detention center, a medical officer, and the prosecutors. The medical officer waits for 5 minutes until confirming the death. After the body is cleaned, the families are notified. The body will be cremated unless the family specifies otherwise. In the case of some high-profile inmates, the ashes are kept in state custody.
What? A cult leader over certain gas attacks, but his ashes remain in custody.
It was only in 2007
His ashes remain in custody is crazy.
that the Japanese government even released the names of those put to death. Currently, there are 106 inmates awaiting their execution in Japan. The last person sentenced to death row killed 36 people in an arson attack. Tomohiro Kato was the last person executed in the country. I only felt comfortable putting this video in production after it was confirmed that a very specific organization would sponsor it. If topics like this one make the most difference meaningful,
W video, if all this is true and real and everything, then wow. But yeah, the death penalty is a very interesting concept. It very much is. It's like I said, I have my own opinions about the death penalty as every other human does in the world. But I mean, like I'm not like mad if like if if a truly terrible person like gets the death penalty. But like when you have humans in control of death, then you have, which happens too, then you have mistakes sometimes that happen where people were innocent all along, and because of the humans' judgment, they needed to die and they didn't even do anything. And I'm not saying that's common, but that is something else as well. So in other words, they have the power to end someone's life through death penalty, but they make mistakes too. You know what I mean? Like they make mistakes as in like they some people they kill some people that or they have killed people before, whatever, that like were innocent or some shit, right? So it's like, yeah. But anyways, W fucking video. Simple as that.